What is a subspecies?
A subspecies is another way of describing a distinct population or variety. This term is used to describe the generation of hybrids that can occur when two different populations meet and interbreed.
How are fossils dated?
There are two methods for dating fossils. The first is known as relative dating. By determining the age of the surrounding rock, scientists can give an approximate age to the fossils therein. Rocks are dated by their distance from the surface, with older rocks generally deeper from the surface. Using the data from other fossils found in the same rock stratum can also be used to give an approximate date to a new sample. The second method is known as absolute dating. Absolute dating relies on the known rates of radioactive decay within rocks. By measuring the ratio between the radioactive forms of an element like uranium-238 to its non-radioactive decayed form, scientists can determine when the rock formed, because that would be when the radioactive isotope was acquired. Amino acids also convert gradually from one form, the left-handed, to another, right-handed, after an organism dies, and so may be used as a method of dating some fossils.
What are the three major groups of chordates?
The chordates are divided into three subphyla: Tunicata, Cephalochordata, and Vertebrata. Tunicates are like little leathery bags that are either free-living or attached to pilings, rocks, and seaweeds. They are also called sea squirts because a disturbed animal may contract and shoot streams of water from both of its siphons. The subphylum Cephalochordata contains the Amphioxus or lancelet, branchiostoma, which looks like a small fish and has the three caudate features as an adult. Amphioxus also shows clear serial segmentation or metamerism. From the Greek terms meta, meaning between, among, after, and meros, meaning part, it is divided lengthwise into a series of muscle segments. Vertebrates, which comprise the third caudate subphylum, retain the same metamerism in internal structures.
What are the stages of insect metamorphosis?
There are two types of metamorphoses. Marked structural changes in the growth processes, complete and incomplete. Incomplete metamorphosis: the insect, such as an ant, moth, butterfly, termite, wasp, or beetle, goes through all the distinct stages of growth to reach adulthood. In incomplete metamorphosis, the insect, such as a grasshopper, cricket, or louse, does not go through all the stages of complete metamorphoses. Complete metamorphosis. Egg. One egg is laid at a time or many, as much as 10,000. Larva, what hatches from the eggs is called a larva. A larva can look like a worm. Pupa. After reaching its full growth, the larva hibernates, developing a shell or pupal case for protection. A few insects, example the moth, spin a hard covering called a cocoon. The resting insect is called a pupa, except the butterfly is called a chrysalis, and remains in the hibernation state for several weeks or months. Adult. During hibernation, the insect develops its adult body parts. When it has matured physically, the fully grown insect emerges from its case or cocoon. Incomplete metamorphosis. Egg. One egg or many eggs are laid. Early stage nymph. Hatched insect resembles an adult but is smaller in size. However, those insects that would normally have wings have not yet developed them. Late stage nymph. At this time the skin begins to molt, shed, and the wings begin to bud. Adult. The insect is now fully grown.
How many nuclear pores are there in a nucleus?
A typical nucleus in a mammalian cell has 3,000 to 4,000 pores or 10 to 20 pores per square micrometer, m. Nuclear pores are not merely perforations, but channels composed of more than 100 different proteins.
What is a limiting factor in an ecosystem?
A limiting factor is any environmental factor that restricts the ecological niche of an organism. Limiting factors are based on the law of supply and demand. Those factors, resources, whose supply is less than demand can influence the distribution of species within a community. Examples of limiting factors include soil, minerals, temperature extremes, and water availability.
How long does protein synthesis take in bacteria, once mRNA is formed?
The bacterium E. coli can add an amino acid in only 0.05 second. That means that synthesizing a protein of 300 amino acids takes only 15 seconds.
What are biosensors?
A biosensor is a unique combination of biological substances, e.g., microbe, cell, enzyme, antibody, linked to a detector. It can be used to measure very low concentrations of a particular substance. An example of a biosensor currently on the market is the insulin pump, which maintains correct blood glucose concentrations for diabetics.
Who discovered lysosomes?
Lysosomes are a relatively modern discovery in cell biology. They were observed by Christian de Duva, 1917, in the early 1950s. In 1955, after 6 years of experiments, de Duva was convinced that he had found an organelle that had not been previously described and was involved in intracellular lysis, digestion. He named the organelle a lysosome. This organelle was the first to be described entirely on biochemical criteria. The results were later verified using electron microscopy. In 1974, de Duva, Albert Claude, 1898–1983, and George Pilati, 1912, shared the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for their work detailing the functions of the lysosome.
What is anthrax?
Bacillus anthracis, the etiologic agent of anthrax, is a large, gram-positive, non-motile, spore-forming, bacterial rod. The three virulence factors of B. anthracis are edematous toxins, lethal toxins, and capsular antigens. There are three major, clinical forms of human anthrax: cutaneous, inhalational, and gastrointestinal. If left untreated, anthrax in all forms can lead to septicemia and death.
Do bacteria all have the same shape?
Bacteria have three main shapes: spherical, rod-shaped, and spiral. Spherical bacteria, known as cocci, occur singularly in some species and as groups in other species. Cocci have the ability to stick together and form a pair, diplococci, when they stick together in long chains. They are called streptococci. Irregularly shaped clumps or clusters of bacteria are called staphylococci. Rod-shaped bacteria, called bacilli, occur as single rods or as long chains of rods. Spiral or helical-shaped bacteria are called spirilla.
What is flow cytometry?
Flow cytometry is an exciting new biotechnology method in which single cells or subcellular fractions flowing past a light source are scanned based on measurement of visible or fluorescent light emission. The cells can be sorted into different fractions depending on fluorescence emitted by each droplet. Flow cytometry can be used to identify particular cell types such as malignant cells or immune cells such as T or B cells. High-throughput screening is a large-scale automated search of a genome in order to determine how a cell or larger biological system uses its genetic information to create a specific product or total organism. The term platform is used to describe all components needed for high-throughput screening.
What are the functions of stems?
The four main functions of stems are, 1. To support leaves, 2. Produce carbohydrates, 3. Store materials such as water and starch, and 4. Transport water and solutes between roots and leaves. Stems provide the link between the water and dissolved nutrients of the soil and the leaves.
How can animals be grouped according to body symmetry?
Symmetry refers to the arrangement of body structures in relation to the axis of the body. Most animals exhibit either radial or bilateral body symmetry. Animals such as jellyfishes, sea anemones, and starfishes have radial symmetry. In radial symmetry, the body has the general form of a wheel or cylinder, and similar structures are arranged as spokes from a central axis. The bodies of all other animals are marked by bilateral symmetry, a design in which the body has right and left halves that are mirror images of each other. A bilaterally symmetrical body plan has a top and a bottom, also known respectively as the dorsal and ventral portions of the body. It also has a front, or anterior, end and a back, or posterior, end.
Is the color of bacteria of significance?
The pigments that occur in bacteria are helpful in the identification of bacteria. Bacteria can be red, purple, green, or yellow. Some bacteria produce pigments only under certain environmental conditions, such as particular temperatures.
How has dill been used throughout history?
Dill has long been used for medicinal purposes. The Egyptians used dill, Anethum graveolens, as a soothing medicine. Greeks habitually used the herb to cure the hiccups. During the Middle Ages, dill was prized for the protection it purportedly provided against witchcraft. Magicians and alchemists used dill to concoct spells, while a commonly known wives' tale stated that dill added to wine could enhance passion. Colonial settlers brought dill to North America, where it became known as meaden seed. Because children were given dill seed to chew during long sermons in church.
Which aquatic animals have internal fertilization?
Certain sharks, skates, and rays have internal fertilization. The pelvic fins are specialized to pass sperm to the female. In most of these species, the embryos develop internally and are born alive.
Are spiders really dangerous?
Most spiders are harmless organisms that, rather than being dangerous to humans, are actually allies in the continuing battle to control insects. Most venom produced by spiders to kill prey is usually harmless to humans. However, there are two spiders in the United States that can produce severe or even fatal bites. They are the black widow spider, Latrodectus mactans, and the brown recluse spider, Loxocels reclusa. Black widows are shiny black, with a bright red hourglass on the underside of the abdomen. The venom of the black widow is neurotoxic and affects the nervous system. About 4 or 5 of each 1,000 black widow bites have been reported as fatal. Brown recluse spiders have a violin-shaped strip on their back. The venom of the brown recluse is hemolytic and causes the death of tissues and skin surrounding the bite. Their bite can be mild to serious and sometimes fatal.
What is meant by the term true breeding?
Individuals, who, when bred to others of the same genotype, produce only offspring of that genotype, are called true breeding. In other words, homozygous individuals, AA, are true breeding when bred among themselves, while heterozygotes, AA, are not.
What features of reptiles enabled them to become true land vertebrates?
Legs were arranged to support the body's weight more effectively than in amphibians, allowing reptile bodies to be larger and to run. Reptilian lungs were more developed with a greatly increased surface area for gas exchange than the sac-like lungs of amphibians. The three-chambered heart of reptiles was more efficient than the amphibian heart. In addition, the skin was covered with hard, dry scales to minimize water loss. However, the most important evolutionary adaptation was the amniotic egg, in which an embryo could survive and develop on land. The eggs were surrounded by a protective shell that prevented the developing embryo from drying out.
What is translation?
Translation is the process that produces polypeptides from an mRNA transcript. This process involves several different types of molecules: tRNA, rRNA, ribosomal proteins, and the energy molecule GTP.
What is the greenhouse effect?
The greenhouse effect is a warming near Earth's surface that results when Earth's atmosphere traps the sun's heat. The atmosphere acts much like the glass walls and roof of a greenhouse. This effect was first described by John Tyndall, 1820 to 1893, in 1861. It was given the greenhouse analogy much later. In 1896 by the Swedish chemist Svante Arrhenius, 1859 to 1927. The greenhouse effect is what makes Earth habitable. Without the presence of water vapor, carbon dioxide, and other gases in the atmosphere, too much heat would escape, and Earth would be too cold to sustain life. Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and other greenhouse gases absorb the infrared radiation, rising from Earth, and hold this heat in the atmosphere instead of reflecting it back into space. Various independent historical measurements conclude that the global average near surface temperature has increased by about 33 degrees Fahrenheit (0.5 degrees Celsius) over the past 100 years. In the 20th century, the increased buildup of carbon dioxide, caused by the burning of fossil fuels, has been linked to this increase. There is some controversy concerning whether the increase noted in Earth's average temperature is due to the increased amount of carbon dioxide and other gases, or is due to other causes. In addition to the burning of fossil fuels, volcanic activity, destruction of the rainforests, use of aerosols, and increased agricultural activity may also be contributing factors.
What is a keystone species?
A keystone species is a species that is crucial or essential to the ecosystem's community structure. Originally, a keystone species was always thought to be the top predator, such as the gray wolf. Scientists have found that wolf population sizes influence populations of both their prey and other species in the environment. However, a more recent viewpoint recognizes that less conspicuous species are also very important, as all species are interconnected in a biological community. Other examples of keystone species include the sea star, Pisister, found along the coast of Washington state, and the black-tailed prairie dog of the prairie ecosystem. The sea star feeds on mussels and prevents the mussels from crowding out other species. The prairie dog is a critical source of food for larger predators. Its burrowing loosens the soil, and its burrows act as home for other creatures.
How do antibiotics destroy an infection?
Antibiotics function by weakening the cell wall, or interfering with the protein synthesis or RNA synthesis of the bacterial cell. For example, penicillin weakens the cell wall to the point that the internal pressure causes the cell to swell and eventually burst. Certain antibiotics are more effective against gram-negative bacteria, while others are more effective against gram-positive bacteria.
How do plants obtain nitrogen?
The primary way that plants obtain nitrogen compounds is via the nitrogen cycle, which is a series of reactions involving several different types of bacteria, including nitrogen-fixing bacteria and denitrifying bacteria. During nitrogen fixation, symbiotic bacteria, which live in association with the roots of legumes, are able through a series of enzymatic reactions to make nitrogen available for plants. Nitrogen is crucial to all organisms because it is an integral element of proteins and nucleic acids. Although Earth's atmosphere is 79% nitrogen, molecular nitrogen is very stable and does not easily combine with other elements. Plants must use nitrogen in its fixed form, such as ammonia, urea, or the nitrate ion.
What is electrophoresis?
Electrophoresis is a technique used to separate biological molecules, such as nucleic acids, carbohydrates, and amino acids, based on their movement due to the influence 532 of a direct electric current in a buffered solution. Positively charged molecules move toward the negative electrode, while negatively charged molecules move toward the positive electrode.
What would be an example of a cross involving multiple alleles?
Blood type in mammals is due to particular marker molecules, called glycoproteins, located on the red blood cell membrane. In humans, the ABO blood type is determined by a gene with 3 alleles, A, B, and I, no membrane marker. A and B code for different types of marker molecules. While A and B are equally dominant, both are dominant to I. So a cross of AIX by blood type AXB would generate the following ratios: 1/4 of type of 1/4 AI type A, 1/4 by type B, 1/4 to type O.
What are the general characteristics of a plant?
A plant is a multicellular, eukaryotic organism with cellulose-rich cell walls and chloroplasts that has starch as the primary carbohydrate food reserve. Plants are primarily terrestrial, autotrophic, capable of making their own food. Organisms. Most plants contain chlorophylls A and B and xanthophylls, yellow pigments, as well as carotenes, orange pigments.
What fungus is associated with chemical warfare?
Fusarium, a genus that is included in the group considered imperfect fungi, produces trichothecenes, which are highly toxic substances that have been tested as agents of chemical warfare. Trichothecenes are very hardy compounds that can survive autoclaving and do not degrade when exposed to light. They are relatively easy to produce and have been prepared as biological weapons. The toxin causes the chronic disease alimentary toxicologia, ATA. Armillaria mushrooms have been shown to reduce hypertension.
What contributions did Overton and Langmuir make to the study of membranes?
As early as the 1890s, Charles Overton, 1865 to 1933, was aware that cells seemed to be enveloped by a selectively permeable layer that allowed different substances to enter and leave cells at significantly different rates. He recognized that lipid-soluble substances penetrated readily into cells, whereas water-soluble substances did not. He concluded that lipids were present on the cell surface as some sort of a coat. Irving 48 Langmuir, 1881 to 1957, proposed that cells were covered by a lipid monolayer. His work became the basis for further investigation into the membrane structure. Langmuir was awarded the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 1932.
What was the first professional organization of physiologists?
The first organization of physiologists was the Physiological Society, founded in 1876 in England. In 1878 the Journal of Physiology began publication as the first journal dedicated to reporting results of research in physiology. The American counterpart, the American Physiological Society, was founded in 1887. The American Physiological Society's sponsored publication, the American Journal of Physiology, began in 1898.
Where does respiration take place?
Different types of animals have different respiratory organs for gas exchange. 286 types of respiratory organs are: 1. Skin, 2. Gills, 3. Tracheae, and 4. Lungs. Many invertebrates and some vertebrate animals, including amphibians, breathe through their skin. Many of the animals that breathe through their skin, a process known as cutaneous respiration, are small, long, and flattened, for example, earthworms and flatworms. All animals that rely on their skin for respiration live in moist, damp places in order to keep their body surfaces moist. Capillaries. Small blood vessels, bring blood rich in carbon dioxide and deficient in oxygen to the skin surface, where gaseous exchange takes place via diffusion. Gills may be external extensions of the body surface, such as those found in aquatic insect larvae and some aquatic amphibians. Diffusion of oxygen occurs across the gill surface into capillaries, while carbon dioxide diffuses out of the capillaries into the environment. Fish and some other marine animals have internal gills. Water enters the animals through the mouth, then flows over the gills in a steady stream and out through gill slits. Although some animals with gills spend part of the time on land, they all must spend some time in moist, wet environments for the gills to function. Lungs are internal structures found in most terrestrial animals where gas exchange occurs. The lungs are lined with moist epithelium to avoid their becoming desiccated. Some animals, including lungfish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, have special muscles to help move air in and out of the lungs. Some animals have lungs connected to the outside surface with special openings, and do not require special muscles to move air in and out of the lungs. Insects have a system of internal tubes, called tracheae, that lead from the outside world to internal regions of the body via spiracles. Gaseous exchange takes place in the tracheae. Some insects rely on muscles to pump the air in and out of the tracheae, while in others the process is a passive exchange of gases. Some spiders have book lungs in addition to tracheae. Book lungs are hollow, leaf-like structures through which the blood flows. These lungs hang in an open space that is connected to a tube. The other side of the tube is in open contact with the air.
What are X-rays?
X-rays are electromagnetic radiation with short wavelengths, 10 to 3, and a great amount of energy. They were discovered in 1898 by William Conrad Röntgen, 1845 to 1923. X-rays are frequently used in medicine because they are able to pass through opaque, dense structures such as bone and form an image on a photographic plate.
Who disproved Lamarck's theory?
In the 1880s, the German biologist August Weismann, 1834 to 1914, formulated the germplasm theory of inheritance. Weismann reasoned that reproductive cells, germ cells, were separate from the functional body cells, soma or somatic cells. Therefore, changes to the soma would not affect the germplasm and would not be passed on to the offspring. In order to prove that the disuse or loss of somatic structures would not affect the subsequent offspring, Weismann removed the tails of mice and then allowed them to breed. After 20 generations of this experimental protocol, he found that mice still grew tails of the same length as those who had never been manipulated. This not only disproved Lamarck's theory of use and disuse, it also increased understanding of the new field of genetics.
What is transformation?
Transformation is the process by which a cell or an organism incorporates foreign DNA. Transformation usually occurs between a plasmid and a bacterium. The transformed cell or organism then produces the protein encoded by the foreign DNA. In order to determine whether cells have been transformed, the foreign DNA usually contains a marker, such as the gene for penicillin resistance. Only cells with the resistance gene will be able to grow in a culture medium containing penicillin.
What is the Darwin Award?
The most popular award by that name is a humorous award given posthumously to those who improve the human gene pool by removing themselves from it.
What diseases have been linked to prions?
It is thought that prions are responsible for the group of brain diseases known as transmissible spongiform encephalopathies, TSES. This group includes the disease that is referred to as bovine spongiform encephalopathy. Mad cow disease, when it occurs in cattle, and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease when it occurs in humans.
Is there a gay gene?
Homosexuality has a strong genetic component. One study found that among 56 pairs of monozygotic male twins, concordance simultaneous incidence for homosexuality was 52%, while it was only 22% for fraternal dizygotic twins and 11% for unrelated adopted brothers. This indicates that the closer two males are genetically, the more likely they are to have the same sexual orientation. Several studies have pointed to a likely location for male homosexuality traits at the tip of the X chromosome. It should be noted that not all males with the sequence identified themselves as homosexual. And so it seems likely that a variety of factors, environmental and genetic, may have roles in determining sexual orientation. So far, there are no correlate statistics for female homosexuality.
What is bioremediation?
Bioremediation is the use of organisms to remove toxic materials from the environment. Bacteria, protists, and fungi are good at degrading complex molecules into waste products that are generally safe and recyclable. Sewage treatment plants perform bioremediation in a limited way. An example of bioremediation is the massive cleanup in Alaska following the Exxon Valdez oil spill in 1989. The superficial layer of oil was removed by suction and filtration. But the oil-soaked beach was cleaned by bacteria that could use oil as an energy source.
What is parsimony?
Parsimony is a method for choosing the simplest explanation among a variety of possible explanations for phenomena when decisive evidence is unavailable. In evolutionary terms, this means grouping organisms or their traits in hierarchies that minimize the occurrence of special events. For example, all mammals are descendants of a fur-bearing, milk-producing ancestor, even though some mammals, e.g., platypus, echidna, produce eggs instead of live young. The most parsimonious explanation is that live bearing is a secondary adaptation that occurred after mammals separated from the other groups of animals. The geographic distribution of species is known as biogeography. By observing similar organisms and their adaptations to different habitats, researchers can ask and then answer important questions about evolutionary change. In fact, the diversity of habitats visited by Darwin on his voyages with the HMS Beagle helped him to solidify his ideas on evolution.
How is DNA related to the size of a cell?
The amount of DNA that a cell must accommodate is significant. Even for organisms with genomes of modest size, there is enough DNA in the typical E. coli cell to encircle it more than 400 times. A typical human cell contains enough DNA to wrap around the cell more than 15,000 times.
What is the generation time for various bacteria?
Generation time is defined as the time required for a bacterial population to double in its number. If a culture tube is inoculated with one cell that divides every 20 minutes, the total cell population will grow to 2 cells after a period of 20 minutes. And 4 cells after 40 minutes, the growth will continue at this rate.
What are blood groups?
There are more than 20 genetically determined blood group systems among humans known today. But the AB0 and RH systems are the most important ones used to type blood for human blood transfusions. Different species of animals have varying numbers of blood groups.
What are the different shapes and functions of the epithelium?
Epithelial tissue consists of densely packed cells. Epithelial tissues are either simple or stratified based on the number of cell layers. Simple epithelium has one layer of cells, while stratified epithelium has multiple layers. Epithelial tissue may have squamous cuboidal or columnar-shaped cells. Squamous cells are flat, square cells. Cuboidal cells form a tube. Columnar cells are stacked. forming a column taller than they are wide. There are two surfaces to epithelial tissue. One side is firmly attached to the underlying structure, while the other forms the lining. The epithelium forms a barrier, allowing the passage of certain substances while impeding the passage of other substances.
What is the controversy surrounding Bt corn and the monarch butterfly?
Bt corn was specifically engineered to control the European corn borer, which in 2003 caused an estimated $1 billion worth of damage to U.S. farmers. In 1999 a study was released, based on controlled laboratory feeding experiments, that showed that corn pollen from Bt-altered plants would kill monarch butterflies. In the study, 3-day-old monarch butterfly larvae were fed milkweed leaves dusted with Bt corn pollen. The larvae ate less, grew slower, and had a higher mortality rate than those fed milkweed with no corn pollen or milkweed coated with non-Bt corn pollen. However, the laboratory study did not provide information on the number of Bt pollen grains that were consumed by the monarch larvae in order to observe the lethal effects. Also, no information was provided on the effects on older, larger larvae, which would be expected to have a higher tolerance to Bt toxicity. Headlines such as "Attack of the Killer Corn" and "Nature at Risk" triggered regulatory action on the part of the European Union to ban the importation and use of Bt corn varieties in Europe. In response, other researchers described the use of Bt as a biocontrol agent since 1938 because of its selective toxicity to certain species within a given insect order. After extensive studies dealing with the likelihood that Bt corn pollen would be found on milkweed plants near cornfields that are close to the habitats of monarch butterflies, certain safeguards were set to decrease the risk of Bt corn pollen to monarchs. 1. Farmers in monarch-rich areas should choose to grow Bt corn with lower toxicity levels. 2. Plant a border of non-Bt corn around a Bt cornfield to decrease the problem of pollen drift to milkweed plants. And 3. Plant milkweeds at sites away from cornfields to increase the probability of female monarchs encountering milkweed plants that are uncontaminated with corn pollen.
Why do animals play?
Many animals, mammals and some birds, particularly, have been observed at play during different stages of development. Although play would seem to be random, ethologists have described three patterns: 1. Social. For establishing relationships to other animals. 2. Exercise, for development of muscles. 3. Exploration of an object. All of these occur during the wrestling, chasing, and tumbling activities of the young of many species. Some juvenile play, such as lion cubs capturing mice, may be practiced for adult activities such as hunting.
According to the most recent estimate, how many genes do humans have?
As of April 2003, researchers estimated that building a human would require only about 24,500 genes. The mustard seed plant has about 25,000 and fruit flies about 13,000. When analysis of the draft human genome sequence was published in February 2001, there was estimated to be only about 30,000 to 40,000 protein-coding genes. This number will probably fluctuate as applications of the HGP are implemented.
Other differences are, how does a mastodon differ from a mammoth?
Although the words are sometimes used interchangeably. The mammoth and the mastodon were two different species. The mastodon seems to have appeared first, and a side branch may have led to the mammoth. The mastodon lived in Africa, Europe, Asia, and North and South America. It appears in the Oligocene era, 25 to 38 million years ago, and survived until less than 1 million years ago. It stood a maximum of 10 feet 3 meters tall and was covered with dense, woolly hair. Its tusks were straightforward and nearly parallel to each other. The mammoth evolved less than 2 million years ago and died out about 10,000 years ago. It lived in North America, Europe, and Asia. Like the mastodon, the mammoth was covered with dense, woolly hair, with a long, coarse layer of outer hair to protect it from the cold. It was somewhat larger than the mastodon, standing 9 to 15 feet, 2.7 to 4.5 m. The mammoth's tusks tended to spiral outward, then up. The gradual warming of the Earth's climate and the change in environment were probably primary factors in the mammoth's extinction. But early man killed many 274 mammoths as well, perhaps hastening the process.
Why do you need protein in your diet?
Of the 20 amino acids used by humans as building blocks for proteins, 8 are essential. In other words, our bodies cannot synthesize them, nor can we survive without them. Luckily, all of the essential amino acids can be acquired by eating animal meat. Complete proteins, and/or certain plant sources, complementary proteins. By combining grains, such as rice, and legumes, such as beans and peas, one is able to consume adequate daily amounts of protein. The recommended daily allowance, RDA, of protein for healthy adults is 0.4 g/lb, 0.8 g/kg, of body weight.
What is the first structure to emerge following germination?
The first structure to emerge following germination is the radicle or embryonic root. The radicle allows the developing seedling to become anchored in the soil and to absorb water. This first root, the primary root, develops branch roots called lateral roots. The lateral roots send out additional lateral roots, eventually creating the multi-branched root system.
What is the Wallace Award?
In 2004, the International Biogeography Society established the Alfred Russel Wallace Award for lifetime contributions to biogeography.
What is the difference between poison ivy, oak, and sumac?
These North American woody plants grow in almost any habitat and are quite similar in appearance. Each variety of plant has 3 leaf compounds that alternate, berry-like fruits, and rusty brown stems. Poison ivy, Rus radicans, grows like a vine rather than a shrub and can grow very high, covering tall, stationary items such as trees. The fruit of R. radicans is gray in color and is without hair, and the leaves of the plant are slightly lobed. Rus toxicodendron, commonly known as poison oak, usually grows as a shrub, but it can also climb. Its leaflets are lobed and resemble the leaves of oak trees, and its fruit is hairy. Poison sumac, Rus vernix, grows only in acidic, wet swamps of North America. This shrub can grow as high as 12 feet (3.6 meters). The fruit it produces hangs in a cluster and ranges from gray to brown in color. Poison sumac has dark green leaves that are sharply pointed, compound, and alternating. It also has inconspicuous flowers that are yellowish-green. All parts of poison ivy, poison oak, and poison sumac can cause serious dermatitis.
What is hibernation?
Hibernation, from the Latin term hiberna, meaning winter, is a period of dormancy practiced by animals to overcome wintry environmental conditions. Hibernation involves a decrease in metabolic rate. The rate of burning calories, heart rate, respiration, and other functions, e.g., urine production, rate of digestion. These rates dive so low that the animal's body temperature approaches that of its surroundings. Small animals whose increased metabolic rate forces them to find an alternative to starving during the winter months are more likely to hibernate than larger animals. Many rodents and bats hibernate, as do some Australian marsupials. Hummingbirds and some other species of birds hibernate as well. As for bears, while they are certainly less active during the winter, they do not truly hibernate. Instead, they take very long naps known as winter sleep.
What significance did De Materia Medica, written by the Greek physician Dioscorides, have?
De Materia Medica, about medicinal materials, was written by the Greek physician Dioscorides, ca. 40 to 90 CE, in the 1st century CE. The manuscript included the names and uses of the 600 plants that, at the time, were known to have medicinal properties. The purpose of the publication was to improve medical service in the Roman Empire. In addition to its medical use, it became the book most often used for plant classification in the Western world for nearly 1,500 years. During the 15th and 16th centuries, European botanists and physicians used De Materia Medica to formulate their herbals, illustrated books on the presumed medicinal uses of plants.
What is the difference between an invertebrate and a vertebrate?
Invertebrates are animals that lack a backbone. Almost all animals, 99%, are invertebrates. Of the more than 1 million identified animals, only 42,500 have a vertebral column. These are referred to as vertebrates. Most biologists believe the millions of species that have yet to be discovered are exclusively invertebrates.
What is the Krebs cycle?
The Krebs cycle, also referred to as the citric acid cycle, is central to aerobic metabolism. It is an adaptation that allows cells to gain increased energy from glucose. The process is critical to the development of multicellular organisms and is essential to the harvesting of high-energy electrons during the final breakdown of the glucose molecule. Byproducts of this cycle are carbon dioxide and water. It is named in recognition of the German chemist Hans Krebs. 1900 to 1981, who received the 1953 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine.
Where is RNA formed?
All RNA is formed in the nucleus, eukaryotic cells, or in the nucleoid region, prokaryotic cells. The principal enzyme responsible for RNA synthesis is RNA polymerase.
What conditions are necessary for seed germination?
Seeds remain dormant until the optimum conditions of temperature, oxygen, and moisture are available for germination and further development. In addition to these external factors, some seeds undergo a series of enzymatic and biochemical changes prior to germination.
Can an octopus learn?
Cephalopods, squid and octopi, are unique among the invertebrates in the extent of their intelligence. Octopi can be taught, for example, to associate neutral geometric shapes with either punishment, a mild electric shock, or reward, food. This can then be used to train them to avoid one type of food and reach for another. Research has indicated that octopi are also tool users, with their flexible arms and suckers. Octopi are able to manipulate their environment, as in building a simple home. After an octopus has selected a home site, it will narrow the entrance size by moving small rocks.
Where do transcription and translation take place?
In bacteria, the process of protein synthesis takes place in the cytoplasm. As bacteria lack a nucleus or other membrane-bound organelles. In eukaryotes, transcription occurs in the nucleus. From there the mRNA moves into the cytoplasm, where it is translated into a polypeptide at a ribosome.
How did the introduction of the potato to Europe lead to a devastating famine in Ireland?
The white potato, Solanum tuberosum, native to South America, was first introduced to Spain in the middle of the 16th century. It was not widely accepted as a food crop since European relatives of the potato, such as nightshade, mandrake, and henbane, were known to be poisonous or hallucinogenic. In fact, all of the above-ground parts of a potato plant are poisonous and only the tuber is edible. The potato was established as a food crop in Ireland as early as 1625 and became a staple of the diet, especially among the poor, during the 18th and early 19th centuries. The widespread dependence on potatoes as a main source of food led to massive starvation. When the plant pathogen Phytophthora infestans destroyed potato fields in the 1840s, over 1 million Irish people died from starvation or subsequent disease. Another 1.5 million emigrated from Ireland.
Why are mass extinctions a part of evolution?
A mass extinction is named for a time period in which at least 60% of the living species present become extinct over a period of 1 million years. Mass extinctions are considered biological catastrophes because of the relative speed and range of their effects. The loss of so many species allows surviving populations to exploit their adaptations in new ways. They can adapt to new parts of the environment without facing competition from other species. Certain organelles, example chloroplasts and mitochondria, within eukaryotic cells share a number of similarities with bacteria. Because of this, scientists surmise that early versions of eukaryotic cells had symbiotic relationships with certain bacteria. The eukaryote provided protection and resources, while the prokaryote specialized in converting energy, either sunlight or chemical, into forms that could be used by the eukaryotic cell. Sugar or ATP, thus the term endosymbiote, meaning shared internal life. Similarities between chloroplasts, mitochondria, and free-living bacteria include genetic material. All have DNA in chromosomes. Protein synthesis, all are capable of making proteins. Energy transduction, all are capable of acquiring and using energy to perform reactions.
How has anise been used throughout history?
The Romans brought the licorice-flavored herb anise, Pimpinella anisum, from Egypt to Europe, where they used it as payment for their taxes. It became a popular flavoring for cakes, cookies, bread, and candy.
What is the purpose of a mordant?
A mordant is a chemical added to the solution used to stain a specimen in order to intensify the stain. Two major functions of a mordant are to increase the affinity of a stain for a biological specimen, and to coat a structure to make it thicker and easier to see upon observation under the microscope.
What is a gene library?
A gene library is a collection of cloned DNA, usually from a specific organism. Just as a conventional library stores information in books and computer files, a gene library stores genetic information either for an entire genome, a single chromosome, or specific genes in a cell. For example, one can find the gene library of a specific disease such as cystic fibrosis. The chromosome where most cystic fibrosis mutations occur, or the entire genome of those individuals affected by the disease.
What is the Kyoto Protocol?
The Kyoto Protocol was an international summit held in Kyoto, Japan, in December 1997. Its goal was for governments around the world to reach an agreement regarding emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. The Kyoto Protocol called for the industrialized nations to reduce national emissions over the period 2008 to 2012 to 5% below the 1990 levels. The protocol covers these greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Other chemicals such as hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluoride were to be added in subsequent years.
How does a red blood cell carry oxygen?
Cells use oxygen to harvest the energy stored in molecules like sugars and fats. Red blood cells use a protein called hemoglobin to carry oxygen to all the cells of the body. Hemoglobin is actually made of 4 separate protein strands. Each one surrounds a central, iron-containing molecule. The hemoglobin group carries the oxygen molecule. Each molecule is made up of 2 atoms of oxygen bonded together.
What important scientific discoveries were made using X-ray diffraction?
In 1951 the protein A helix was discovered by Linus Pauling, 1901 to 1994. X-ray diffraction was used to reveal the double helix structure of DNA in 1953 by Maurice Wilkins. 1916, Francis Crick, 1916 to 2004, Rosalind Franklin, 1920 to 1958, and James Watson, 1928. Dorothy Mary Crowfoot Hodgkin, 1901 to 1994. Used the technique to determine the structure of vitamin B12 in 1956.
What is dry rot?
Dry rot is a misleading common name for this form of decay since one of the primary requirements for fungal decay is moisture. This form of decay is referred to as dry rot because it is found in wood that is not visibly moist or damp. The fungus Serpula lacrymans produces specialized mycelia that enable it to carry water and nutrients from a location with the conditions necessary for decay to locations where these conditions are not met. Mycelia can carry water and nutrients up to 15 feet 4.5 meters, across materials such as stone and concrete. The environmental requirements for the fungus are humid air with a relative humidity greater than 95% and temperatures between 32 degrees and 82 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees and 28 degrees Celsius. Serpula lacrymans is common in wooden buildings of Europe, Asia, Australia, and Japan. It is uncommon in North America, although a related fungus. Marulaporia incrassate causes similar damage that is not as extensive.